Jean-Paul Sartre's ethics reaches its most demanding point when he turns from analysis to stance. After freedom, bad faith, conflict, violence, and historical pressure have stripped away innocence, one question remains unavoidable. How does one resolve to act at all? For Sartre, resolution is not the moment when doubt disappears. It is the moment when doubt is accepted and action proceeds anyway. Resolution does not end responsibility. It begins its most serious form. This is why Sartre's idea of resolution has nothing to do with confidence, conviction, or moral clarity. Those qualities often signal the opposite of seriousness. They suggest that responsibility has been displaced onto history, necessity, ideology, or righteousness. Sartre refuses all of these displacements. Resolution, as Sartre understands it, is the decision to act without guarantees. It is the acceptance that one will act while unsure, exposed, and answerable. To resolve is not to believe one is right. It is to accept that one will be responsible, even if one is wrong. This immediately separates Sartre from moral philosophies that treat decision as the end of ethical struggle. In many ethical systems, deliberation precedes action, and resolution marks closure. Once the correct rule is applied, or the right principle identified, the agent acts with moral security. Sartre rejects this structure entirely. For Sartre, there is no moment at which responsibility closes. Decision does not end ethical tension, it concentrates it. Once one resolves, one becomes fully implicated in what follows. Responsibility does not stop at the decision. It extends into consequences, reinterpretations, and the responses of others. This is why Sartre insists that resolution is not relief. Resolution is weight. To resolve is to stop seeking alibis. It is to stop asking whether one is permitted, justified, or historically required. Sartre insists that these questions, when used to secure certainty, are evasions. They delay action while pretending to prepare it. Resolution ends delay, not doubt. This does not mean Sartre dismisses reflection. On the contrary, reflection is unavoidable. But reflection cannot deliver moral safety. At some point, one must act knowing that reflection has reached its limit. That limit is not ignorance, it is exposure. Sartre believes that most people avoid resolution precisely because of this exposure. They prefer hesitation, procedural delay, or moralizing commentary. These stances allow one to appear serious without committing oneself. Sartre is unsparing toward such positions. He sees them as refined forms of bad faith. Bad faith at this stage no longer appears merely as denial of freedom. It appears as refusal of resolution. To refuse to resolve is to continue benefiting from freedom while refusing its costs. One critiques, analyses, and condemns while remaining untouched by consequence. Sartre treats this posture as ethically hollow. Resolution, by contrast, means stepping into consequence. This step is irreversible. Once one acts, one cannot retreat into abstraction. The act enters the world, others respond, damage may occur, futures shift. Sartre insists that this irreversibility is the defining feature of serious action. This is why resolution cannot be rehearsed safely. One cannot practice resolution. One resolves only in acting. Sartre also insists that resolution does not purify motives. One does not resolve because one is morally superior, enlightened, or virtuous. One resolves because one cannot avoid acting without also choosing to avoid. Avoidance is itself a decision. This insight is central. Sartre denies the existence of a neutral position from which one can wait without commitment. Silence, delay, and withdrawal are all ways of taking up a situation. To refuse to resolve is to resolve to let things continue. This is why Sartre insists that responsibility attaches even to those who claim to have done nothing. Resolution, then, is not heroic assertion, it is acknowledgement. It is the acknowledgement that one is already involved and that refusing to act is itself a stance one must own. At this point, Sartre's ethics becomes deeply uncomfortable. There is no clean moment of decision, no moral reset, no fresh start. Every resolution carries history with it, past choices, past failures, past compromises. Sartre does not offer redemption through resolve. He offers continuity. To resolve is to say, this is what I am doing, and I accept that it will define me and affect others. It is not to say, this is right. This distinction matters enormously. When people confuse resolution with righteousness, they become dangerous. They stop listening. They stop doubting. They treat criticism as attack. Sartre insists that such certainty is the enemy of responsibility. True resolution preserves vulnerability. One resolves knowing that one may be judged harshly, misunderstood, or condemned. One resolves knowing that future reflection may reveal error. One resolves knowing that no authority will rescue one from these judgments. This is why Sartre insists that responsibility does not end at commitment. Commitment is not absolution, it is exposure sustained over time. The individual who resolves must continue to answer for what they have done, not once but repeatedly, as consequences unfold and meanings shift. Sartre sees this ongoing answerability as the mark of ethical seriousness. Resolution, then, is not a moment. It is a stance maintained under pressure. This stance is exhausting. Sartre does not deny this. He does not promise that living responsibly will be sustainable, rewarding, or socially affirmed. He promises only that refusing responsibility will hollow action from within. By the end of this first part, the structure of Sartre's position should be clear. Resolution is not certainty. It is commitment without refuge. Responsibility does not end with decision. It deepens after it. Action does not close judgment. It opens it. But this raises a further problem. If resolution does not eliminate doubt, guilt, or exposure, then how does one continue acting without collapsing into paralysis or despair? How does one sustain resolution over time, especially when consequences are severe or condemnation is relentless? Sartre does not answer this by appealing to virtue, hope, or moral reward. He answers it by confronting what it means to remain responsible after action, when innocence is no longer possible. If resolution does not end doubt and responsibility does not end with decision, then Sartre forces us into the most difficult ethical terrain of all. How does one continue to act after acting? How does one live once consequences unfold, judgments appear, and the meaning of one's action begins to escape one's control? Sartre's answer is stark. One does not escape this condition. One inhabits it. Resolution for Sartre is not a single act of will. It is a stance that must be maintained after the moment of action, when the comforting illusion of control has collapsed. Most moral philosophies focus on decision. Sartre focuses on aftermath. This is where responsibility becomes most real. Once an action is taken, it enters a world that no longer belongs to the agent alone. Others interpret it, others suffer or benefit from it. Outcomes diverge from intentions. The agent discovers that what they thought they were doing is no longer the sole meaning of what they have done. Sartre insists that this loss of control does not lessen responsibility. It deepens it. Responsibility does not mean controlling outcomes. It means refusing to disown them. This refusal is where most people falter. When consequences turn out badly, the temptation is immediate, to retreat into explanation, justification, or necessity. One says the situation changed, others misunderstood, circumstances intervened. Sartre does not deny these facts. He denies their moral function as escape routes. To explain is not to absolve. Sartre insists that responsibility after action consists in remaining answerable, even when answers are painful, incomplete, or rejected. One does not resolve once and move on. One resolves again, each time one refuses to disown what one has done. This repeated resolution is what Sartre means by seriousness. Seriousness is not intensity or moral passion. It is endurance. It is the capacity to remain present to one's action, even when it no longer feels justified, admired, or successful. This endurance is what separates resolution from fanaticism. Fanaticism resolves once and then closes itself off. It treats the original decision as sacred. Criticism becomes betrayal. Doubt becomes weakness. Responsibility hardens into dogma. Sartre rejects this hardening absolutely. For Sartre, the moment resolution becomes immune to question, it ceases to be ethical. Resolution must remain exposed. It must remain open to reinterpretation, condemnation, and regret. This openness is not indecision. It is humility. Humility here does not mean self-denial or self-hatred. It means recognizing that one's perspective is never total. One acts from within a situation one does not fully grasp. Others see what one cannot. Time reveals meanings one could not anticipate. To remain responsible is to accept this partiality. This is why Sartre insists that responsibility survives even self-condemnation. One may come to judge one's own action harshly. One may regret it deeply. Sartre does not treat regret as failure. He treats it as a sign that responsibility has not been abandoned. What would be failure is the refusal to revisit the act at all. Sartre therefore distinguishes sharply between standing by an action and standing behind it. To stand by an action is to defend it at all costs. To stand behind it is to acknowledge it as one's own, even when one no longer defends it. This distinction is crucial. Standing by seeks closure. Standing behind accepts exposure. Sartre believes ethical maturity consists in the ability to stand behind one's actions without insisting on their righteousness. This capacity is rare. Most people want either innocence or certainty. Sartre offers neither. He offers ownership. Ownership does not mean celebrating what one has done. It means refusing to pretend it was done by someone else, or by history, or by necessity. This refusal becomes even more demanding in collective action. Political decisions are rarely solitary. They are taken within groups, movements, institutions, and causes. Sartre insists that collective resolution does not eliminate individual responsibility. To say, "we decided," does not mean, "I am absolved." After action, the individual remains responsible for how they continue to participate. Do they question? Do they object? Do they withdraw? Do they remain silent? Each of these responses is a new resolution, carrying its own responsibility. Sartre therefore rejects the idea that responsibility is exhausted by initial commitment. Commitment is not a moral endpoint. It is the beginning of a series of decisions. This is why Sartre insists that ethical life has no final form. One does not reach a point where one can say, "I have resolved correctly, therefore I am done." Resolution must be renewed in changing circumstances, under new pressures, and in light of new consequences. This renewal is exhausting. Sartre does not disguise this fact. He does not offer consolation, reward, or peace. He offers only coherence. Coherence for Sartre means refusing to fracture one's life into moments of responsibility and moments of escape. One either owns one's actions across time, or one does not. This demand explains why Sartre rejects moral narratives that promise redemption through future outcomes. One cannot say, "This will all be worth it later," and consider responsibility complete. Later does not erase now. Responsibility persists because meaning persists. An action continues to mean something as long as its effects endure. Sartre insists that responsibility tracks meaning, not intention. As long as one's action shapes the world, one remains answerable to it. This is why Sartre believes ethical seriousness is inseparable from vulnerability. One must remain open to being wrong, to being judged, and to being changed by what one has done. This openness does not paralyze action, it deepens it. A person who acts knowing they must live with the meaning of their action acts differently from someone who believes they will be redeemed by necessity or success. They act with restraint, hesitation, and care, not because they are afraid, but because they are responsible. By the end of this analysis, Sartre's position should be unmistakable. Resolution is not the end of doubt. It is the decision to live with it. Responsibility does not end with action. It begins its most serious phase after it. Ethics does not promise peace. It demands endurance. Sartre offers no method for sustaining this endurance. Any method would become another alibi. He offers only a demand. Do not abandon responsibility once action has occurred. To live ethically, for Sartre, is not to act correctly once and for all. It is to remain answerable, again and again, without refuge. That is not heroism. It is seriousness sustained over time.